They'll be showing up shortly. And before we start the meeting, I just want to stress that this committee will strive for the most beneficial outcome for the Rossmoor community, at least from our perspective. And I propose that we do this in a collaborative manner between us, the City of Seal Beach, the new owners, and the County Road Commissioner, who has been involved a lot with RHA people. And lastly, I think we should try to generate a plan of action, either tonight or in progress, to help us accomplish those goals. So with that, I believe we have some special guests this evening from both Seal Beach and the shops of Rossmoor. And I think that a couple of those folks from Seal Beach would be interested in making some comments this evening related to these issues. Is that correct, Mr. Tabuada?
Yes, sir.
Director Casey, may I just state for the record that Ralph Vardabadian has arrived at 6:06?
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. So let's see, can we introduce the first of the...
Yes, sir. Members of the committee, we have two officials from the city of Seal Beach who would like to make a very short presentation to kind of set the tone for the rest of the meeting and to impart information to the community about how they arrived at the decisions that they arrived. I have Mark Persico, who is Director of Development Services, and Sean Crumby, who's the Assistant City Manager, Director of Public Works. And I'll let whoever's first in line for this to step up to the podium and make their presentation. And please state your name for the record, please.
Certainly. My name is Mark Persico, the Development Services Director for the City of Seal Beach, as Henry said. And thank you very much for inviting us here this evening. I do know that there are three issues that Ron had enumerated that she would like some information on. What I can talk about are the improvements which have happened on site, and then talk about where we are with respect to the city's housing element. I work very closely with Sean Crumby, who is the Public Works Director, and Public Works deals with everything within the public right-of-way. So any street improvements on Seal Beach Boulevard would be reviewed by Public Works, and then anything on site is reviewed by my department. Traffic studies, which are done, are jointly reviewed by the two departments, just to kind of give everybody a context of how we work internally. I'd like to briefly go over some of the traffic studies which have been done for the property, going back to 2004, when the city did a traffic study for a project which was at that time called the Village at Rossmoor Center, which, for those people who were here in 2004, is the northerly portion of the shops at Rossmoor, which is where the old Parasol restaurant is and where CPK is now. So it would be Rossmoor Center Drive north up to the gas station. That project in 2004 was called the Village at Rossmoor Center. The city did do a traffic study in 2004 for that portion of the project. And then in 2005, late October of 2005, the city applied for grant funds to look at some street improvements at St. Cloud and Seal Beach Boulevard. We were notified in March of 2008 that we successfully secured the grant funds, and at that point, and I'll have Sean talk about this in more detail because, again, Sean's department is more intimately involved in that. He did work with a number of people from, I believe, the Community Services District on those improvements and to talk about the design of those improvements. Kind of jumping ahead to the on-site improvements, I know there's been a number of questions about some of the recent projects that the Planning Commission has approved. The Planning Commission approved two projects. Most recently, in April of last year, they approved an In-N-Out, which is under construction currently, and then the Rite Aid, which is where the old gas station was at the corner. And the Rite Aid will actually include the gas station site as well as the building that was occupied by Kentucky Fried Chicken and Verizon. So both of those buildings were approved and reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission in October of 2011. Those individual projects did have a circulation study that was done. With the In-N-Out, the biggest issue that we were concerned with in order to protect everybody's interest was stacking onto Seal Beach Boulevard, and then how would the In-N-Out impact the overall circulation within the shopping center. So In-N-Out did prepare a circulation study that was reviewed and approved by staff, and then ultimately approved by the Planning Commission. There was also a traffic study that was done for Rite Aid. As you may recall, there were two driveways on Seal Beach Boulevard and two driveways on St. Cloud, which is how you used to access the gas station. Those driveways will be reduced from 4 to 2 as a part of the new Rite Aid once the Rite Aid starts construction. And again, Sean can talk more about that, but generally if you restrict the number of turn movements which you have off of a street, it improves traffic flow on the street and traffic safety as well. There's also another building which wasn't approved by the Planning Commission. The zoning ordinance doesn't require that the Planning Commission approve everything. There are uses which are permitted uses which would be reviewed by staff. If they meet all of the zoning requirements, they're approved at a staff level. Building permits are issued and the property owner begins construction. The newest building, and probably the biggest building that's been constructed there for quite some time, is going to be a prototype, which is a Toys R Us and Babies R Us. That building is about 47,000 square feet. It's going to sit where the former Albertsons was, and then behind Albertsons, as you may recall, there were a couple of small out shops. The new building is about 1,000 square feet less than the previous retail use. So because it's retail for retail, again, Albertsons is now going to be become a Toys R Us. They're both retail uses. It's about 1,000 square feet less in terms of gross floor area. That meets the criteria under the city zoning code, which gives me and my department the ability to review the project. If it meets all the zoning requirements, we issue building permits. So that's where we are on that building. I think the last issue that people had some questions about was the city's housing element. For those people, I'll try to make this very brief, even though housing law can be rather complicated and make your head spin, even mine. The state requires that cities adopt housing elements every 5 years. And as a part of the housing element, the city needs to adopt, or needs to show, I should say, that there are available sites for affordable housing. It only requires that the city identify sites. And the state, while it says you need to identify sites for affordable housing, there's nothing in the law that actually sets income limits or rent rates. What the state uses is density as a proxy for affordability. In other words, if you have a project that's built at 20 units an acre, the land value per unit is much less than if you had that same 1 acre and you built one single family house on it. So the state again says for sites, the city needs to identify sites that have a minimum density of 20 units per acre. Again, there's nothing in the zoning ordinance, or there's nothing in state law which says that it needs to actually be constructed and occupied as affordability. They're just looking at a density requirement. So the city council did appoint several years ago an ad hoc committee. It's a 15-member committee comprised of members from all 3 council districts, 3 members from all 5 council districts, And this committee has been meeting off and on for the last several years to look at available sites. There were 17 sites that the committee looked at and worked through all 17 sites. As a result of that, they came up with 2 sites that they felt were adequate sites that met the requirement that could be zoned for 20 units an acre. The 2 sites were, I think as everybody knows, 1 acre of the parking lot in the shops at Rossmoor, and then a parcel at the corner of Seal Beach Boulevard and Pacific Coast Highway, which is currently occupied by the liquor store and the bait shop, and then there's a vacant parcel just to the south of that. So if you take the building on the corner, if that building were demolished and rebuilt as mixed use, meaning retail on the first floor and residential above, that would qualify as an affordable housing site, as well as the parking lot, 1 acre of the parking lot. So that's kind of the process that the ad hoc committee went through. Again, they looked at 17 sites. They made a formal recommendation back in October 10th to be exact. There was a joint meeting of the Planning Commission and the City Council. The advisory committee, along with myself and the consultant, made the presentation, kind of walked the Planning Commission and City Council through the thought process that they went through and how they arrived at the conclusions that they did. And after about an hour and a half worth of discussion, the City Council directed staff to send the draft housing element to the state. This is not a final housing element. What we did was we sent the draft to the state. We're now waiting for comments back from the state, or I should say we actually got comments back from the state. We have to make additional changes to the draft housing element. The next meeting, coincidentally, we meet the same time apparently that the CSD board does, which is the second Tuesday of each month. Our meetings are also at 6 o'clock at City Hall. So the next meeting of the advisory committee will be on February 14th at 6 p.m. at City Hall. At that meeting, they will be reviewing, again, the draft housing element from October of last year, as well as considering making some changes in response to what the state has said.
And did the city staff endorse the committee's recommendation?
We generally do. They're appointed by...
Did you in this time? In
this
case?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, they're appointed by the council, and they're really the, they're kind of the people on the ground. They live within the community. So yes, I think the reason that the council has community input is because they understand the issues certainly a lot better than staff does. So yes, we did support their recommendations. The state reviewed the draft housing element. The state has some questions that we need to clarify, some issues that we need to address. The committee, I'll answer your question in 1 minute, Brenda. The committee will, again, on February 14th, be reviewing the draft again. It's only a draft. There will be formal public hearings by the Planning Commission and City Council once the committee feels that there's a report that they're comfortable with. The ad hoc committee meetings are open to the public, so I would certainly welcome people to attend those meetings. And we're trying to do an outreach to Rossmoor. We haven't, I'll say, been very good at doing that in the past, and we'd certainly like to do a better job, or we will do a better job in the future.
Yeah, I was going to ask, procedurally, when you send a draft to the state,
yes,
is there any requirement that you have to alert and seek public comment for those in proximity to where a housing element would be, such as us, even though we are not in the jurisdiction? Is there a requirement?
The requirement that the state has is that you hold public meetings. They're not specific as to who gets notified, what notification process you go through. When we do the formal public hearings on the final housing element, there are very specific requirements in the city's ordinance about notification of people within 500 feet, So certainly Rossmoor would get the Community Services District, as well as the Homeowners Association would get notification of the formal hearings. But to answer your question on a draft, it's not very clear what the outreach process is.
Yeah, because you mentioned every 5 years you have a housing element plan. In a 5-year cycle, where are you currently in that process?
About 4.5 years late. We should have had a housing element adopted in 2008. And this, full disclosure, we should have done this many years ago, and we haven't for a variety of reasons. So we're actually very late in the cycle. So we haven't, that's why we haven't been before you before. And I know that Brenda had a question.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions, if I can take a second. I understood that there were some people who voted against having it in the center. The committee of 15. Where were they from?
I don't recall what the final vote was. I'd have to actually go through the minutes and look at the minutes to find out how.
And that College Park East didn't want them? The representative up in this area did not want?
I honestly don't know what because the committee was meeting monthly, and they did a lot of brainstorming before they came to a final recommendation.
My understanding was that the committee is made up of different areas of Seal Beach, and anybody that is in Seal Beach proper down south didn't want it there. That's why that Seal Beach and Pacific Coast Highway wasn't considered. But is it not true that you could break up those, that low income or affordable housing, the units could be broken up and placed in different areas? So you could have 4 here or 5 here?
Well, let me begin by responding to the Seal Beach proper comment. We look at the city with, equal review. We review projects in every part of the city the same way. Everybody gets the same level of treatment. Our zoning ordinance and our general plan does not discriminate between Old Town, College Park East, College Park West. So I'd like to start there. And then you can, yes, come up with different sites. Each site needs to be able to accommodate a minimum of 16 units. So in terms of your specific question, can you do 4 units here and 5 units there? Actually, you can't. The minimum is 16.
And when was the last time that you did a study and
housing element?
Brought it up to
We're actually over 25 years late. Our last housing element was done in 1990.
And you had that shopping center available to you most of that time, if you had to designate?
Yes, we did.
Is what's that parking lot currently zoned?
It is commercial, general commercial, I believe.
And did you consult with the owners about the idea of designating that?
We did talk to the owner as a part of just our due diligence, and yes, the property has changed hands.
But what did the prior owner tell you at the time of designation?
Well, there were a series of meetings that we had that actually predate the city's housing element. There were discussions, work on the housing element, I should say. Work on the housing element started in early 2010. So prior to that, we just talked very generally about different options for the shopping center. It's a 40-acre parcel. It's a significant player in the city of Seal Beach, and it's obviously very important to the Rossmoor community. So we had general discussions about different land uses, different options on the property. Housing came up as one of the options, again, prior to the housing element ever being talked about. So that when we started talking about the housing element, this came up, the parking lot came up as a potential site in the housing element. So it's kind of a chicken and an egg. It's really hard to say what happened first.
Did they tell you that they had no intention of putting housing there?
They said they have no interest in building housing at this time. They made that very clear from the very beginning. I think what I'd like to say is the housing element, again, there's many quirks to the housing element. The state doesn't actually require that the housing be built. What the state requires is that sites be available, and that's the term in state law. So there's no income restriction, and there's no requirement that it be built. from the state's perspective, they're looking at if somebody wanted to come in and build housing, are there sites? So,
But there doesn't seem to be a site here because the owner doesn't want a site there.
well, the owner has said they have no interest in building housing at this time, and that's correct. There is no requirement that the housing be built either.
So it would have to be rezoned in order.
Yes, it does.
And the property owner wouldn't have any, what say would the property owner have in a rezoning?
We take them into consideration just like we take everybody else who's interested in the application.
Out of the 17 potential sites you've identified, how many of those would accommodate 20 or more units of low-income housing?
Affordable housing, there's actually only one, which is the shops.
So we're it.
At this point, yes. We originally, I mentioned as part of my introduction, we designated the corner of Seal Beach Boulevard and Pacific Coast Highway, hoping that we could make the argument because we're a small city, we don't have a lot of large parcels. So we did put the liquor store and bait shop at the corner on the list of available sites. The state has already rejected that as an available site. So when I said we're going back to the committee on February 14th to do some additional work, that's one of the issues that the committee needs to look at.
Okay, sort of makes me feel like we have a target on our back.
You do not have a target on your back.
All right.
What about
Just-
the Boeing
just-
site, though? Was the Boeing site, I mean, there's a lot of property there that can be
Right.
instantly rezoned in down market and narrow space.
The Boeing site was actually, I'm glad you brought that up, the Boeing site was actually designated for an emergency shelter, a homeless shelter. So there are a number of issues that the city needs to address in the housing element. It's not just sites for affordable housing, it's emergency shelters and homeless shelters. So what the committee recommended and the council ultimately sent to the state was to rezone the Boeing specific plan for an emergency shelter.
Okay.
How many acres is that site, the Boeing?
Off the top of my head, I'd probably say it's 40, plus or minus 40 acres.
So you could designate 1 acre that's not going to ever be built and have it for your income housing, low-income housing, and then have a situation where you've accommodated the state, correct?
That's something that the committee will look at on the 14th.
Or that park site that you're looking at down there?
The park site was actually rejected by the committee because we have an application pending before the state, a grant application for a park. If
Okay.
that grant application falls through, we aren't awarded the grant, then we'll certainly look at that as a potential
Could
site.
you not develop it as a park, and since it's never going to be built as housing, and still have your park, and still have your designated housing?
I don't think that that would pass muster with the state. The state wants sites which somebody could come in and could build housing on. And if there's a park there, that would obviously preclude somebody from building housing.
So the state actually wants you to designate a location that perhaps it's not today, it might be 5 years from now or 10 years from now, that they may decide that they want you at that point to build low-income housing, since the only affordable housing you have there is the trailer park, correct?
Yes, that's the only.
What
that's the
about
only
Gum
current-
Grove?
Excuse me?
What about Gum Grove?
The committee actually looked at Gum Grove
And what
Park.
was the matter with that?
It's a park, and there's also actually a deed restriction when the city purchased the park from the Hellman property. There was a deed restriction that it'd be used as park into perpetuity.
And in front of the houses there that were just built a few years ago? What about the land that's there where you go in?
That's actually currently still owned by the Hellmans. You're talking about below the Heron Point project.
Correct.
Yes.
So you could do the same thing with that property that you're doing with the owners of this property, which is to just state that you need it for a designated area for low-income housing, correct?
We could do that, yes.
So that site's available. So you do have sites. It's just that this site here is the best site as far as the city is concerned.
I think it's the most practical. I think we would have a difficult.
I think there's a lot of people who are going to disagree with that in this room.
The whole room.
If I
Know the
can,
audience.
well,
Can I
I'm
ask
glad
you-
I could provide some levity for people.
I-
But if
can
I
I ask-
can, just real quick, if I can finish up that thought when I say the most practical. The most practical means that it has infrastructure available, it's got roads nearby. The Hellman property is unimproved property, there are no utilities, there's nothing there. So when I say the most practical, I think it would be difficult to convince the state that that's an available site.
Well, the houses there certainly have utilities.
Yes, they do.
So it's obvious that it can be put in there. It's
Yes,
running
they
from
can.
someplace.
Yes, they can.
Let me ask you a question. The acre, I thought it was actually an acre and a half. How many parking spots does that acre cover, would you say? How many parking spots do you get on an acre?
Roughly, doing the math here, about 70 to 80 parking spaces.
Okay, are you able to use those parking sites in your calculation for parking in that center as part of as part of the required parking sites that are available, that need to be there for what you're putting in there?
Yeah, as part of the rezoning, that if the draft housing element remains as it is and that site remains on the list, there's a follow-on action, which is the rezoning. As part of the rezoning, that's one of the issues that we certainly need to look at. Is there adequate parking within the shopping center if that 1 acre was not available for parking?
And you haven't looked at that yet, and you're designating that?
We've looked at it at a very preliminary level, and preliminarily, yes, there's available parking. I think for most people that go into that shopping center, that parking, the area behind Sprouts and Stats is largely underutilized property.
Well, it's largely underutilized now because of Stats. When you have 3 businesses in there, it's going to definitely be utilized. The other thing, I want to just make a comment. You said that the Toys R Us and the Babies R Us are taking up Albertsons and a few shops that were behind in that.
Correct.
And so it's all commercial. My recollection of what was there was an Albertsons or a market. There were different markets there. Next to it was an office building, and next to it was a small local hardware store. So I'm assuming that you're able to use the office building and convert that over into commercial and say that that's equivalent to a market also? Because
Are you talking about where Century National, the 3-story office building?
no, I'm talking about where you're putting Toys R Us and
Right.
Babies R Us. There was a market, an office building, and a small hardware store.
Right.
A doctor's office.
Ace Hardware, too.
So how does that equate to?
Medical office actually has a higher parking requirement. So if you're going from a medical office to a retail, you actually have parking available, excess parking.
Oh.
In other words, a 1,000-square-foot medical office would require 5 spaces. A 1,000-square-foot retail would require 4.
So let me just ask a few questions to wrap up. On this issue of the housing, what is the next step the city is planning to take?
The next step is the committee will be convening again on February 14th, excuse me. The committee will be meeting on February 14th. We'll walk them through, staff will walk them through the comment letter we got from the state. There will be some recommendations. There'll be a discussion about additional work that needs to be done. And then at that point, the committee will, do what it always does. It'll review the matters. It'll either at that meeting make a final recommendation back to the Planning Commission, or there may be follow-on meetings which would happen then, again, the second Tuesday in March and April, and so on, depending upon how long it takes.
And so once they make the recommendation to the Planning Commission, how long before the Planning Commission would act to finalize the designation?
It's probably 30 to 45 days between the committee's work and when the Planning Commission would hold a public hearing. And then the council would have a hearing in addition to that, which again would probably follow about 30 days after the Planning Commission meeting.
And ultimately, the City Council has to approve it,
Yes, they do.
in addition to the Planning Commission?
Yes, they do.
I'd like to take a step back. You mentioned that 2010 was when you initiated the element, and then you just recently submitted to the state your draft. When was the date that you submitted to the draft? The draft to the state, I'm sorry.
October 12th.
October 12th. In that, did you mention that the current owner had no interest in pursuing residential in their property? Did you make that known to the commissioner or whoever the lady is?
In October, that wasn't the property owner's position.
So you're saying that their position was in October, they were on board?
They're not housing developers.
But
if I can just answer your question, I don't think they've ever intended to build the housing. I think what their thought was that it was an option that could be pursued by somebody that was a housing developer. So prior to and even up to the draft housing element being submitted to the state, they were indifferent, I guess is the best way to put it, as to whether or not the property was zoned residential or the property was zoned commercial.
And how was that articulated in your draft? How was it complete? How was it actually phrased to the review board in the state, the position of the landowners?
The state doesn't look at that, actually.
But if it's part of the document, what
Right.
did that document say?
It said that the city would consider rezoning 1 acre of the Shops at Rossmoor parking lot.
And it didn't say anything about the owner's point of view?
It did not, that's correct.
Okay, thanks.
One last question.
Yeah, because we still have other people who
just
we...
one last
people wanna hear.
question.
Lots of agenda.
If the city were to understand that Rossmoor at large considered this a hostile act, would it affect the city's thinking?
That's something that, we'd have to talk to the Planning Commission and Council about. It's not really something that I can respond to tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Before, Mark, can I ask one other question? I made a note here. On that in and out study, you said they did a circulation study.
Correct.
And what is the path for In-N-Out Burger? Where are they going to empty back out onto Seal Beach Boulevard?
They'll come off of, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the southerly, where you've got St. Cloud, and then it's the first signal that you come into where you would enter for Kohl's. Mm-hmm. I don't actually think that has a street name to it. Town Center. So it would be off of Town Center Drive. There are going to be no new driveways on Seal Beach Boulevard. So you would travel west on Town Center Drive, take a right as if you were going to, say, Stats or Sprouts, and then have to go up about another 100 feet. So they're closing, for people that are familiar with the parking lot. Right now, you come out of the parking lot, and there's a number of islands and ways for you to get to the main north-south driveway. They're closing off a couple of those islands so that the parking and the stacking is fully sequestered from the remainder of the shopping center. That was something that was very important to us because we knew it was very important to the community. Nobody wants cars backing up on Seal Beach Boulevard like you have now at PCH and 2nd, the In-N-Out in Long Beach. We did not want to repeat that.
But where are they going to exit?
Back out onto Town Center Drive.
Okay.
So
They're going to turn around?
Yes. I don't have a plan with me this evening, but there are no new driveways on Seal Beach Boulevard.
And so here's a traffic question. To the extent that...
Here's our traffic expert.
Okay. I think the city is putting in a 2-lane turn pocket on northbound Seal Beach Boulevard for access to St. Cloud, because there was some historical evidence that 1-lane turn pocket was filling up and restricting northbound traffic. We have a concern that at Rossmoor Center Way, the single-lane turn pocket is also already filling up, even in advance of the completion of the project. And we're concerned that the same thing is going to happen. You're going to have restricted traffic movement. If that were to happen, I know you might not think it has happened yet, but if it were to happen and become a congestion or choke point, would the city have a plan to mitigate that?
We would absolutely, by the way, I'm Sean Crumby, the Director of Public Works with the City Seal Beach. We are absolutely monitoring that turn pocket as well as all of our streets. And should that become deficient, it's going to become a situation where the city will absolutely do something about it and address it at that time. One thing I would like to stress is that these things are mitigated with available funding from the city. So the turn pocket that you mentioned at St. Cloud, that is something that was identified by the city as early as 2005, and the city went out and applied for and secured grant funding, and I'm prepared to speak in depth about it, but did traffic studies with that grant funding, went out and secured grant funds for construction, and went forward and built that project. So there were more than one goals with that project, more than one items that we were looking to address. That was one of those items. But all of those steps within that process are what took such a long duration for that project to be completed. With this, it would be much smaller, of course, but I'm just bringing that up so that everybody's aware.
And in the city's approval of the center, did it examine the traffic patterns within the parking lot itself, and was it satisfied that you're not going to get gridlock inside the parking lot, or is that pretty much a problem of the developer?
Well, there were two traffic studies for different developments within the park that Mr. Persico mentioned, and both of those traffic studies were focused on the impact or mitigating the impact of those individual developments or those individual projects on the area. They weren't comprehensive in relation to the traffic flow within the entire center. To my knowledge, there has not been a comprehensive report like that done, and that's something we'll continue to monitor.
I'd like to ask for a little timeout. Committee, we've got 20 minutes left.
Right.
We have traffic, if anyone has those type of questions. We also have the new landowner representation here.
Yes.
And I'm just curious, within our point of view, which ones do we really want to talk to? And we obviously have people here who've come possibly to make public comments. So I like to see hands of who actually, at the right time, would want to make public comments here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I suggest in the next, call it 15 minutes, that we maintain like 4 to 5 more minutes of this gentleman's time, then have them, the property representation, come up, and then open it for that.
I think that's
So
a good
let's
plan.
go ahead. Anyone have questions of Sean?
That was my last. That was my last.
So is it the desire of the board to hear detailed information about that dual left?
It is, but we also have a time, we have a short shot clock, if you will, between the next meeting. I have just very rarely, we're all talking about forward thinking, what's going on, but I do want to ask you, with your experience, to take a step back to 2004, when you actually did the first study for the Shops of Rossmoor, where the parasol is, and now you get to look back, now that it's 2011, did you plan for enough parking? Did you plan for the right in-out access ways? And are you satisfied today on the decisions that you made in 2004?
Well, that document you're referring to in 2004, I believe, is related to, it's the environmental document for the complex. And, you know, it had projections related to traffic and the various impacts. You know, I heard a concern about that turn pocket, and that is something that on Rossmoor Center Drive that we're continuing to monitor. As far as the interior traffic, you know, I'm not prepared to speak as to the efficiency of how that traffic moves within the center. I guess the long and short of it is that some things could have been better, some things performed very well.
Well, the reason I bring it up is there's times where lessons are learned. And if you did in 2004, and here we are in 2011 with a lot of other things coming in, statements that we're trading one retail for another, traffic's going to be the same. That's not true. There's going to be some retailers that have higher velocity. Some retailers or food places are destinations, like In-N-Out Burger. I don't impulsively say I go to In-N-Out. Well, maybe sometimes I do, but a lot of times it's I want In-N-Out. So the point I'm trying to make that I would encourage you and everyone working together here is look and really evaluate the decisions you made in 2004, 2005, and try to take that learning and apply it to the center that's in our backyard.
Were you required to do a traffic study?
For,
For the development in the center there.
do you want to take that one?
There's actually a series of, most of what the city operates under is called the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA. And CEQA has a series of thresholds that projects get evaluated against. If the project, so CEQA I would say is the big driver of whether or not a traffic study gets done. The second driver of that is the city zoning ordinance. So to answer your question, under CEQA, there was a traffic study done in 2004 for the northerly portion of the shopping center. For the main portion of the shopping center south of Rossmoor Center Drive, the decision that was made in 2004 was because the new buildings were replacing existing buildings, modernizing existing buildings, that a CEQA analysis wasn't required for the southerly portion of the shopping center.
Okay. Can I ask, have you done traffic volume measurements on Seal Beach Boulevard, and could you provide the committee with annual traffic volume measurements, both southbound and northbound?
Absolutely. We do annual counts, and they are provided to Orange County Transportation Authority. We'd be happy to provide those.
Thank you.
And you could do that sequentially, like 2004, 2005, 2000. You can go back historically and provide that?
Absolutely.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the road commissioners also involved in that process?
Well, that OCTA has a requirement for all cities to do it. So we do that and provide it for OCTA. I believe it's actually every 2 years.
Okay, so you share information.
We all share information.
In the decision-making process?
Yes.
Thank you.
And I think this should wrap it up. Can I just add one piece of information I obtained today,
Sure,
Sean?
sure.
I spoke with the county road department and about the traffic volume measurements on St. Cloud, Montecito between St. Cloud and Bradbury. And I know that a lot of our audience will be concerned about growth of traffic there. In 1998, that average had an average daily trip volume of 5,502. By 2005, it was 5,703. And then in the most recent measurement was May 2011, it was 5,895. So it's fairly stable. There's been some very modest growth in there, less than 10%. I just wanted to say that that's one piece of information I came along with. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Next up are the representatives of the new property owner. If you guys can please come on up.
Hello. I'm Christine Smith. Thanks for inviting us. I'm representing the shops at Rossmoor, and this is David.
David Josker.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you for inviting us.
So she's marketing. What are you, David?
Christine is the marketing director for the shops and has been for...
Right, for about 6 years.
For the last 6 years.
I've been involved with the previous owners, and now I'm with the new owners. So I've been around. I've been with the community. I've watched it grow. So the new owners are very interested in continuing everything that's been going on and supporting the community.
Good.
I work for CBRE, and we are the property managers, and we're here in representation for our client, which is the new owner of the shopping center.
Okay. We look forward to whatever you want to start with a little presentation, or is this more of just question and answer time?
It's really question and answer. We thought it was important that we were here to show, our partnership with the community. My role in this, my team is going to be the one that is managing and is on site here at Rossmoor, and we enjoy a very special relationship with this owner. I oversee the Orange County and the Inland Empire region, and we have other assets that this client owns, and I want to make sure that the community understands that this is a class owner and operator, and I think that continuing the relationship with the community through marketing, through the outreach, was one of the things that was attractive to the new owners in the process of the acquisition, and is a top priority moving forward as well. So.
And they were in full disclosure that they knew that there was a housing element plan that could affect their future. They were aware of that when they made this?
I can tell you that there is no intention for the new owner to have any type of housing built on the property.
How do they feel about their land being rezoned?
You know, I can't speak for them on how they feel. I can tell you that they have no intention of having the housing built on their property, though. It was not acquired with that intention. It wasn't in the pro forma that they ran to acquire it, so that's
So you
not
consider that a non-issue? Low-income housing is a non-issue?
It's a non-issue.
Right.
Non-issue.
As long as you
No,
own
no,
the
no, it's
property.
a non-issue. It's
Okay.
a non-issue, absolutely.
For those in the audience, can you say who the property owner is so everyone understands the new names, the new players, since there's people here? Bring everyone up to
Absolutely.
speed, please.
I believe a press release was
Yes.
sent out yesterday that announcing the new ownership, and there's an LLC that was formed, but AEW Capital Management is actually the new entity ownership.
In your lease agreements with your businesses there, do you designate routes for trucks for delivery and times of operation?
Yeah, we do. All of the deliveries and traffic is to be done before, I believe, 7 a.m. in the back of the center.
Before 7 a.m.?
Before 7 a.m.
And what routes are they
Or,
designated?
I'm sorry, after 7 a.m. I'm sorry. After 7 a.m.
And what routes do you designate that they take?
In terms of streets, I don't know those off the top of my head. Like David said, I handle marketing, not the actual operations procedures for the center. But I do know that all of those are in place, and we have personnel on site that handle those issues every day.
So we could contact you and...
Absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely. Any issue whatsoever, feel free to reach out to the property manager.
Yeah.
There's going to be a public comment that you will be able to speak. Is it a comment or a question that you have of this team up here? I know.
Yeah, time is
Hey,
short. We're sorry
We're
about
sorry.
that.
How are you working with the community? Did you talk to the community and see if they wanted a Babies R Us and a Toys R Us?
Committee members, if the person is not at the microphone, they're not being recorded. This is on television for the purpose of everyone hearing and understanding what's going on.
Why don't we do this? We're going to open this up to comments and questions of not only this team or the other team. We're going to make those questions really short and answers. Unfortunately, we do have a shot clock here. We wish we can do more, but we can't. So please come up to the microphone, state your name, and have a question. Everyone's allowed to either make a comment or a question at this point.
Would you like us to stay up here?
Please stay up.
Please do.
Yes. And the Seal Beach team, you might need to come up here and answer questions as well. So thanks.
Good evening. My name is Michael Obradovich. There are two of us in this area. I'm Michael Obradovich on Yellowtail, that's a professional engineer. The other one is Michael Obradovich, my son. He lives on Montecito, and he's the lawyer. I think I'm very deeply troubled by some of the comments that came from our friends from Seal Beach about dated studies and piecemeal studies of traffic. I think they know darn well that according to CEQA, what they have to have is a current and cumulative traffic and circulation study that should factor in such things as the I-405 and I-605 expansion, along with all of the other additions. CEQA is very specific insofar as they say, and I don't have the specific paragraph, but I can supply that at your request. It says that you can't rely on piecemeal studies, and you can't do that. And what they have apparently done, and they are doing, is contrary to CEQA, because CEQA says that you can't do that in order to get exemptions from CEQA. That seems to me what Seal Beach is doing. They're doing all of these studies, making references to these studies, invoking these studies as part of this whole project to get around the provisions of CEQA. And that needs to be looked into very carefully.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please.
I would encourage you to meet with them.
Hi, my name's Cheryl Rudick. I have a couple things. One, to the folks from Seal Beach on traffic. Briefly, you said there's funding available in the future to mitigate any problems. The problem is now. We have a problem. I'm not sure what you're referring to with the future and the funding and mitigating. The problem is now, and you should get out there on a daily basis. To our new friends and folks who are coming in, I want to clearly and briefly state that nobody wants these retailers here. Nobody is happy. Where are the owners you're representing? I, too, am in charge of marketing, so you can spin it however you want, but no one is interested in the retailers and the projects that you're bringing in to the community, and we will do whatever we can to resolve these issues. It's not a marketing spin. It's not a PR spin. Nobody wants what you've brought. We don't know what you're talking about when you're partnering with the community. At what time did you get community input on what's happening? When did you ask the community? Specifically.
The leases for Toys R Us?
For any, yeah, whatever's going in. When did you reach out to the community to find out what is happening?
So first, the closing.
Excuse me.
Yes.
The microphone.
So the acquisition for the new owner didn't close until the second or third week of December. So the projects that I think everyone is talking about at this point were already decided and were already in motion. So the new owner has not made any decisions regarding, reaching out to the community for those leases.
But you would want to know, though, if you're purchasing something the community wants, right?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
one wants it.
Okay.
Nobody wants what's coming into the mall.
Can we have the next speaker?
Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Diane Rush. I'm a longtime resident of Rossmoor, and I was wondering if anybody could answer my question. Is there a Seal Beach environmental impact report that's actually available, either hard copy or online, that we might refer to just to find out how much these details have been unpacked? I would like to read about how many of these studies have actually been completed and digested.
Sorry, what kind of an environmental report?
It's an environmental EIR, environmental impact report, because there are so many aspects to those that have to be very carefully lined up and answered and evaluated before it actually gets to a planning commission or a city council meeting. I have a lot of experience with public address, and the environmental impact report usually answers these questions, or at least demonstrates large gaps if there are unanswered questions. So is that available to the public right now?
Can the folks from Seal Beach answer that question?
In 2004, the decision was made that an environmental impact report was not required for the shopping center.
Okay, thank you. There's the answer.
There you go.
This is the, please, last one.
Hi there. This is Emily Nell, and my concern is just to see if it might be possible, and I think it might be with a question first. Is it Sean Crumby with the Seal Beach traffic? If the light at Town Center could be revised. Town Center for going eastbound and westbound traffic out of the Target Center and out of the Kohl's Center. Currently, the coming out of the Target Center heading westbound, the two lanes is one's going straight and one's going left, and the other lane is just right turn only. If it could be where the right turn lane is also a straight lane on both directions, and that the green light go independently of each other. So just the green light going for cars coming out of Target Center and just a green light for cars coming out of the Kohl's Center. It's already getting very backed up in that Target Center with those two stop signs, people wanting to exit that center heading west. And when all these other enormous stores open. On the Kohl's side, we're going to have quadruple the amount of traffic trying to get out. And right now, it's already really backed up with cars trying to go straight instead of going left.
Let's see what Sean has to say.
Anyway, so I was hoping that that we could get it where it's just like at St. Cloud, where for the people leaving the CVS side, they got a green light. People coming out of Rossmoor, they have a green light. I think that would just help the traffic flow a little bit better. And I don't know, can you do that?
So you're correct. Coming out of the Target Center, there is a dedicated right turn lane and a through left. Changing that dedicated right to a through right is something that we're currently looking at this time. As far as the phasing of the signal, we'd be happy to look into that and see if there are improvements we can make.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're gonna unfortunately have to wrap this up. We have another meeting scheduled directly after this. I don't.
It's late. Can we give them 5 more minutes?
Henry?
We started
I don't know. Do we
have a hard timeline of 7 o'clock period, or is there some flexibility?
You do not. You can start your meeting anytime after 7 o'clock.
Okay. Then in fairness to the people who are lined up, we are going to
we'll give you a
listen
few
to your
more minutes.
questions or your comments. Based on time, though, let's keep it to about 2 minutes per person. Thanks.
Hey, my name is Craig, and I'm a resident here in Rossmoor. I have a couple questions. When I went to the city council meeting a couple months ago, or it seemed like it was about 2 months ago, there was a couple, Gary Miller, who's on, I believe his name is Gary Miller, it's on the city council. He brought up a couple areas that he said were not on their list of whatever 17 areas. He thought the most appropriate was the tanker farm over near the apartment building. Some tanker farm that's off south of PCH. And then he said that wasn't on the list, and he said that's actually more appropriate than any place on the list. The other place he gave was that open area, which I think you referred to. There's a large open area. It used to be a nightclub on PCH going all the way back. And he said somewhere on that area, he said, was be much more appropriate. And he says, you're not, those were even on the list. And I don't know, like the one you mentioned about I'm not sure if we're talking about the same place. You talked about a park or something. Was that the tanker farm? Okay, so that was the tanker farm. And then you'd address the other area. There's quite a large area there behind where it used to be a nightclub and all that open area behind Heron Point.
Yeah, certainly, Craig. I'll try to answer your questions. The city did look at 17 sites. The tank farm was actually on one of those 17 sites.
It was?
Yes. Also, the State Lands Commission, which is the old casino property, was on the list of 17 as well. So we believe, staff believes, and the committee believes they did an exhaustive sites analysis. So we did look at both of those sites.
I thought Miller said that they weren't on the list.
I wasn't there, so I'm not sure what he said.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My other area is the traffic is really horrendous now.
And
those are dedicated streets. You know, a lot of those in that shopping center, this is not only private property, but a dedicated street is patrolled by the police department. You can be cited. It's a street. And so the city does have control over a lot of that traffic flow in that shopping center. It's not the prerogative of only the owners of that shopping center.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a few questions for the people.
Your name, please?
My name's Diana McCrae. I live in Walkerly in Rossmoor. I previously lived in Seal Beach in College Park East, so I know, well, my opinion when I lived at College Park East was that Seal Beach interest was keeping downtown a little village, and they really didn't care that much past, you know, past, well, maybe at Westminster there, you know, beyond that, but it really was keeping care of the integrity of downtown Seal Beach. I would like to know what Seal Beach has done to mitigate any of these traffic problems. Have you considered giving us a payment, Rossmoor a payment, or letting us share in the sales tax revenue that Seal Beach gets?
Those are questions that perhaps the committee
well,
could
I wonder if any of this has ever come up. I mean, we are impacted here.
Right.
Seal Beach talked about Toys R Us replacing Albertsons, Dr. Waldrop's office, and Ace Hardware. That's comparing apples to oranges. Albertsons was a neighborhood store that residents from Rossmoor would walk to, or you'd walk to Ace Hardware. It's not like having a Toys R Us department store, I guess you'd call it. I just think that's disingenuous of, and I wondered what kind of new stores. I didn't even, when I heard about the In-N-Out, I didn't even realize that they would put something else in there. I didn't, I don't know that much about planning a shopping center. And it isn't a village, it's not shops, it's really a shopping center now. And I wondered how many more stores could be built on our property here.
Well, there's a lot of acreage in there.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm very naive.
Right.
And I wondered what Seal Beach
Do you know that number, sir? How many more stores could be built in that?
I spoke with Matt.
Each store can be a different square footage, and it's difficult. I mean, at this point, the only two that are at this point, the only two that are planned are the three. I'm sorry, the In-N-Out, the Rite Aid, and the Toys R Us. At this point, there's
another pad right next to the gas station, right? So that's available for development. Right? Am I correct?
I think that's going to be part of the Rite Aid.
I'm not.
No, the opposite end.
Well, I understand you guys bought it in December.
There's a pad.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Chick-fil-A, I think, is going in there.
Can I just mention that I spoke with Madeline Jackrell, the prior owner, and she had indicated to us that the total development from St. Cloud all the way north to the Union 76 gas station is approximately 425,000 square feet of development. And it's her assertion that that is within 3 to 4% of the square footage that was there historically. Now, obviously, it's different kinds of retail, it's going to be more intensively used.
Yes.
But it's, in terms of square footage, which is what triggers the municipal laws, and it's the same. It's roughly the same.
It is the same square footage, but having a Toys R Us and a Babies R Us is a different story. People will come from the freeway to come.
I understand that. But of course, before there was a 24-hour liquor store, there was a bowling alley, and there was a donut shop.
Right.
So
and
if we're talking about quality, we really have to.
Bowling alley. It was a neighborhood bowling alley.
It was a 24-hour liquor store, so I guess that was a neighborhood liquor store too.
Store.
I want to make.
It's a small liquor
can
store.
we let the other people have comment, please?
I want to just make mention of one thing. That shopping center, whether you are aware of it or not, that shopping center is not built out. Their perspective that they sent, to potential buyers of that center spells out that there is additional space there for development. It points to farmers and merchants and drapers potentially going out of there. Don't believe they renewed the lease. You would know that. Has the lease with farmers and merchants been renewed?
I'm not sure at this point.
You don't know if they're...
I don't know that right now. I mean, I can...
Okay, well, I will tell you that as of when this perspective went out, it hadn't been renewed. And they also...
Brenda, I can tell you I met with the bank manager. Their lease expires 2014, and they're not sure yet, but it's a 2014 is when the Farmers Bank lease comes up.
This perspective said that their extension was not granted. So the answer is that the center is not built fully out.
And I have questions like this for Seal Beach and also In-N-Out. A lot of times In-N-Out will have a freeway sign, right, saying there's an In-N-Out off Seal Beach Boulevard. Are those the kind of things that will make more traffic? A lot of things I just don't think Seal Beach has ever even thought of to help mitigate the traffic and the people and a different element that might come in. And we also deal with the Target. This is also Seal Beach. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you.
I think we should just take one more person, if that's somewhat acceptable to everyone.
Well, there's only two left.
Listen, this meeting is not meant to go all night long.
But we were 6 minutes late.
Just going to hear out these last three people. We'll hear them out. Just let's keep it to the point. Questions or comments.
Then keep it to 2 minutes.
Okay, so my name is Jennifer Robbins, and I'm born and raised in Rossmoor. So my question to you, I'm sorry, I don't remember what your name was. So you worked with the previous owner for 6 years, and you stated up here that you had worked closely with the community about bringing in these new stores. What community were you working with?
Let me answer that. We didn't, that's not what I said first. So first off, when I say we work with the community, we work with the community in terms of community involvement with groups. We do a lot of kids activities. We've hosted a lot of events at our center. We've worked with the chambers to host the health fair. We've done an emergency expo at the center. So we have a huge relationship with all the cities surrounding the center. Our goal is to partner with the center. I mean, the center is surrounded by the community, and we try to embrace the community. We've donated a lot of money to local communities or local community groups. We've been really active with the...
So I think what the mistake that's being made is that you're dealing with Seal Beach. Seal Beach doesn't live here. Rossmoor lives here. There isn't, I mean, College Park East is the closest of Seal Beach here. So
the main benefiter of all of the funds that the Shops at Rossmoor has done donations for is the school district. And the reason that is because the school district is encompassed by all of the community groups. So we try our hardest to donate to the Education Foundation and to the libraries that are being used by your community. Those are the organizations that we see benefiting everybody as a whole. And
out of fairness to the next two people, if we don't give them a forum, we really need to turn it over.
The community wasn't asked about what was being put in, just so we're clear. You didn't reach out and say, are you interested in a Toys R Us? Are you interested in a Babies R Us? Are you interested in a Staples? It wasn't reached out to. The community was not reached out to.
Okay. Thank you. Next question.
Hi, my name is Tina Kulik, and I'm also a resident of Rossmoor. And this lady said basically the first half, speaking to you guys, but did the gentleman who spoke first, did he say that the Planning Commission and the City Council have to approve all the new businesses that go in to the center?
No, they didn't.
No. Did you say something? So
they did not say that.
Who makes the decisions then? They have no control over, Seal Beach has no control over what goes in?
They have zoning control, and I'm control.
So they have no control, so maybe it is.
But what businesses are is what that's what their job is to do, is figure out how to maximize retail profit.
Okay, so I will just reiterate what she says then, because I don't feel like, I feel like Seal Beach has gotten to keep their downtown feel. They always are able to fight to keep out what they want. They did not want to drive through Starbucks, and they don't have one. And we're having an In-N-Out. We have food. We have all chains. And there's absolutely no hometown feel. We can't even really walk around the center. I wouldn't, if I had little kids still, I would not send them over there. It's not safe for them to walk in the parking lot. There's really no good way for them to get in. Cars are going every which way. To get home from, I live South Rossmoor, to even get home, I have to go out one particular parking lot that's backed up, then try to get across the street to go through to the other parking lot. That's the only way home, unless I want to go all the way around the community to get to my house. It's absolutely ridiculous. So you guys really need to consider that people want a place to walk to, things to do. We had a gym. We don't have a gym anymore. And a Toys R Us, a Babies R Us. I mean, Kohl's was enough as it is. There's no department stores in downtown Seal Beach. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Joe Watson. I just have a quick question. Over the years that they've developed the city, the Rossmoor Shops at Rossmoor, I've noticed that northbound on Seal Beach Boulevard, where you turn left, where the In-N-Out's going to be, and also left where the carousel was, they're starting a stacking problem, and it's creating backup. And I was wondering if the city of Seal Beach has looked at that and what they're going to do about it.
This is near the Panera Bread?
Right, making a left there and
the two
then
left
a left
turns
right.
in going north, yeah.
And it's
We
really
asked about
it
that.
blocks that whole center lane.
I think that's being addressed to some extent, and it will continue to be an issue until we can come to some conclusion on it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'd like to thank Seal Beach and their team for showing up, the property managers, and obviously thank you, Rossmoor citizens, for coming. We're sorry we were starved for time, but we're flexible to get an extra 15 minutes. we will probably have more meetings in the future. Check the website, and we'll let you know when those meetings are, and also when Seal Beach City Council meetings are as well.
Excuse me, gentlemen, who is the actual chair of this committee?
We don't have one right now.
You don't have one
We don't have one.